Scott, we've got one we've talked about a little bit, kind of tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but we've talked about how this show is international and what have you, and we've got some people from the UK listening to the show, which is awesome. I mean, I think that's so cool that people so far, I'm so humbled that people abroad want to listen to, and as well as within the U.S. as well. But we're humbled by all our listeners. But the fact that international folks listen to this show is awesome as well. And this email we got this week, Scott, came from Keith Evans, who lives in the Bahamas, which is really cool. And by the way, if you ever get a chance to go travel to the Bahamas and you haven't, go do it. It is so awesome down there. Oh my gosh, it's so pretty, and you can have a ton of fun. Anyway, my twin brother Keith and I are diehard Bengals fans. We live in the Bahamas. AJ Green, Andy Dalton, and Vontaze Burfict are well known in my country. I've been following the team since the John Kitna days. Hopefully the 2003 John Kitna days and not before that, because that probably wouldn't be too fun. But looking forward to the upcoming season as well as your weekly podcast during the season. Thank you. Very nice. I always enjoy listening to your predictions and in-depth analyses on the previous games. 2 questions. Let's start with one. The first one. Do you think, and this we can kind of just be quick with this, Scott, do you think the Bengals, as we sit here today, a week and a half away from training camp, do you think the Bengals return to the playoffs this year?
I'm going to say yes, just because other than Steelers, the division isn't very strong. So, I think the Browns are going to be better than a 1-15 team, but I think it's a winnable division. And I think, too, they pretty much have everything they had 2 years ago when they were 12-4. I mean, they were, 10-2 when Dalton went out? Other than losing Zeitler, but granted, the offensive line is an important piece, so I'm not trying to dismiss that. But pretty much outside of the offensive line, you can argue they're pretty much equal or better than a team that was 12-2 in 2015 when Dalton went out. Now, do I think they'll go 10-2? I don't know, but that was a very good team, and I think this team should be comparable. So, yes, I'm going to say yes to the playoff team.
Okay. And unfortunately, we missed you that night. Rebecca Toback from CincyJungle.com filled in very nicely, and we talked about a schedule prediction. We went through game by game. I believe she had about 11 wins for the Bengals. I think I had 10. I still see them in that 9-10 win range, maybe squeaking in. I don't know if that means division title, maybe squeaking in with one of those wild card spots. It kind of depends on some of those other teams that showed some good growth last year. The Titans, who the Bengals play, teams like that, if they can kind of sustain that, the Raiders, or if they end up kind of taking a little bit of a backslide, we'll see. What I do think is I think we might see, unfortunately, maybe a little bit of a slow start from the Bengals, followed by a pretty strong middle and end, just because this team has so much turnover and there's a lot of new parts to it. I want to say yes. I'm not completely sure, but I will say they're probably in that 9-10 win range. I've been kind of saying that both before and after the draft. I kind of see them right in there, but I don't know if we're looking – I don't know if I fully agree with you, Scott, if we're looking at a 12-13 win team this year. I think the potential is most definitely there. There's just kind of a lot of question marks, and a lot of things have to go right for it to break that way. Doesn't mean it can't. We'll see. His second question, Scott, and this is kind of an interesting one. How do you feel the Bengals will fare against the AFC South and the NFC North opponents this year? So essentially some of the unfamiliar teams that do boast some very good teams that the Bengals will see this year. You know, pretty strong Vikings team, a strong Packers team, a Lions team that you don't know what you're getting from year to year. In that NFC North, I think the Bears will probably not be very good. Then you look at the AFC South. You've got the Texans, who the Bengals I think are 1-6 against in the Andy Dalton era. Then you have obviously the Colts, who are getting Andrew Luck back. So I kind of I won't talk too much about it just because I want to urge the listeners to go back and listen to our schedule prediction episode if they haven't already. But I do want to hear your thoughts on that, Scott, since we didn't have you on that episode.
And just giving a very quick, I'm going to say, looking at the teams that are in the NFC North and AFC South, I think that's 5-3, 6-2, somewhere in that range, because you have Chicago, who is a bad team, getting one. Minnesota, they have some. They're a decent team, but it's a very winnable game. Detroit came out of nowhere last year as a playoff team. I'm not sure if that was real or mirage. Green Bay is basically Aaron Rodgers and kind of mediocre outside. I mean, obviously, the rest of his team isn't nearly as good as he kind of carries that team. Last time we played them, we contained them a bunch of times and won that game, and then it's time to go. And then last time was the one that had that wonderful fumble. So I think for like last time we played Bay. Those are pretty much all winnable. South Jacksonville is absolutely horrible. Are Andrew Luck and a bunch of nothing. I know we always struggle when Manning was there, hopefully against Luck. Tennessee, I think it's a very, very good running team. And now with Corey Davis, it might be a little better in the receiving game. They have Delanie Walker. I think he's still there. And I know last year we kind of struggled letting tight ends score touchdowns. That one could probably be a challenge. Houston, as you mentioned, we, for whatever reason, just can never seem to beat Houston, which is kind of ridiculous. But that being said, I see 5 or 6 wins. I might be crazy. I don't see any less than 4. So I'd say 4 to 6. And no reason not to be optimistic because right now we're in
4 to 6 wins. Well, I mean, they'll probably need that. They'll probably need at least the lower portion of that because they'll probably need another 4 in their own. I mean, they might need all of those that you mentioned because they'll probably need another 4 at least in their own division. The Titans game really, again, I don't want to harp too long on the schedule just because we've talked about it a lot. But there is a really tough stretch of games from week 7 to week 11, and it's week 6 is the bye, and you go week 7, they're at Pittsburgh. Week 8, they host the Colts, which won't be easy. Then they go to Jacksonville. Well, Jacksonville, they weren't very good last year. They might be a little better this year. Who knows? They could be a lot better. I don't know. Probably still a 6-win team, so that should be what you think is a win. But the problem is the next 2 weeks you go to Tennessee for that tough game, that tough team you just mentioned, Scott, and then you follow it up again with the 3rd straight road trip to Denver. So in 6 games, you've got – in 5 games, you've got 4 away games against the Steelers, the Jaguars, the Titans, and the Broncos, and then the only home game you have is against the Colts. So that's a tough stretch of games right there. And the Bengals at that point, if what I said was coming to fruition, if they kind of continue to gel and maybe that's when they start playing a little bit better football, that's really going to need to be the spot that they start doing that. If those teams are, if that appears as treacherous as it does on paper, I will say I think there was something on Twitter noting that the Bengals have the second or the second easiest or the easiest schedule in terms of this year. We'll see. Again, that stuff you can be optimistic about it, but obviously that changes from year to year, and you never know exactly what teams are going to look like every year. But we still are remaining a little bit of optimistic. We still have a little bit of optimism here. There was Mr. Sinister in the YouTube chat, and Sinister with a C. Question: my friends and I often debate on if Dalton has the arm to succeed in the deep ball offense forming with Ross, Green, Malone, etc. What are your thoughts on this? Well, first of all, Mr. Sinister, I'd like to hear what side of the fence you're on. You said you and your friends debate it. I'd like to hear what side of the fence you're on. But Scott, I I've seen some improvement from Dalton in terms of the deep ball. There's still some throws where I go, oh gosh, AJ Green's got to bail him out on that one. But I've got some thoughts, but I want to hear yours on this, because a lot of people vary on Andy Dalton's arm strength. Maybe it is an arm strength issue. Maybe it's a footwork issue. Maybe it's a timing issue. All of the above. I haven't talked to you about this one, so I'd like to hear from you on it.
Yeah, just to give a quick answer, I'm going to say absolutely yes. Dalton can do it. Now, if you would have asked me in 2011, 2012, 2013, play after play where AJ Green would burn receivers and Dalton would underthrow him and he'd do stuff, make these amazing acrobatic catches. And they were acrobatic because them and it gave the defenders time to catch up to him. And so he had to make these insane catches to get the ball that he should have gotten the touchdown. That being said, the last couple of years, the accuracy is a lot of the metrics support that. So this thought of Dalton not being a great or an accurate deep ball thrower seemed to match more. It's perception we have from years, and something matches what he's done lately. So I think as it goes, this seems to support it. I think we've seen it. I think it's related to Tom House, but it seems to be going to Tom House for whatever reason. Going forward, you take a difference in his deep ball. It's not that he didn't have, he didn't seem to have the enough. He's not, the also. Well, that's not necessarily true. But anyway, he was. He could never get green on the deep balls last year. It seems to have been fixed. So I'm going to take Tom House if he didn't agree with it. If not, then I'm going to take him for the coincidence, because I think I'm going to say on the yes to that one.
I think he has a strong enough arm, and I don't always. I think I'm in agreement with largely what you said. I think he's got a strong enough arm to always do it, and we've seen him throw a lot of big bombs to AJ Green. We've seen AJ Green bail him out of some poor throws. I still think there are throws in that intermediate range where Andy is obviously short and intermediate range, but there are some intermediate throws I've seen Andy Dalton make that are wow throws. And I think back to specifically, if you think to week 3 of 2015, that dart he threw against the Ravens to AJ Green, and AJ Green did a ton of stuff after, obviously, where he kind of pirouetted out of tackles and all kinds of stuff, and it was in a gigantic play right after. I think it was a fumble return for a touchdown, something like that. Bengals responded right back. There are throws I've seen Andy Dalton make, 20, 25, 30 yards down the field. Another one that comes to mind, if you remember that Seattle Seahawks game in 2015, the one to Eifert. Eifert made a ridiculous catch, but it was the only spot that Andy Dalton could have thrown it, and it was I think it was in overtime, or when they were driving to kick that tying field goal. There are a lot of throws I've seen him make that are wow throws. There are some other throws where he either forces it or underthrows it, doesn't get enough on it. I think he's got a strong enough arm. I think he can throw the deep ball. I think he's gotten better with it. I still don't think he's absolutely outstanding at it. One thing I'll say, Mr. Sinister in the YouTube chat mentioned Ross and Malone. I do think, especially as some of those new guys get acclimated to the NFL, and especially if you look at Ross's skill set, Malone is a little bit more of a, go route, maybe a deep post, a corner, still needs some development. If you look at Ross, though, Ross is a guy that you can do a bubble screen and he just let him do the work and he can take it 60 yards. He can do the same on a slant. He can do the same on an intermediate route. He's not just a guy that can fly down the sideline and beat a corner. He can do a lot of different things in space. And I think the Bengals, especially early on with Ross, maybe as they look to get him on the field and develop a role for him, that is something that you might want to look for, even though it's not a deep ball. It might result in a long touchdown because a guy like Ross can dance around tackles, outrun guys, and do some things in space. But overall, I think Andy Dalton's gotten better with the deep ball. I think Scott and I agree with that. Probably not the best in the league, but gotten better with it. And he's really improved on his accuracy, especially if you look at the turnovers the last 2 seasons. And that's something that bodes well for the team as it goes forward, especially with all these new pieces.